I started with Friends of the Yampa about a year ago. Prior to that, I was a high school biology and environmental science teacher, thus the clipboards, the pens, and the pieces of paper. I presented last night on something different to the Route Recreation and Conservation Roundtable. It was a 10-minute presentation. I prepared for it. I practiced it multiple times, and I was very glad I did. But you know, for a 45-minute talk, you can't practice a 45-minute talk. So, and I would never, ever have talked for 45 minutes to my students, 15 minutes, and they were like checked out. So I have taken some efforts to make this a little bit interactive. The piece of paper that I gave to you can serve as a doodle board if you were bored with me. You can doodle on it. There'll be a couple of times during the presentation where I might ask you, give you an opportunity to write some things down, and then at the end, if you give it back to me, I can use it as feedback. What a KWL chart is, it stands, does anybody know what it stands for? Anybody a teacher in here? What does it stand for?
The K is what you know, the W is what you want to know, and the L is what you learned.
Right, so as you are listening to my talk today, if you are a real savvy person in the world of rivers, like my colleague Mike Robertson probably would, if he finds himself bored, he could, although he won't be, I know he won't be, but if he knows a lot about fish and about rivers, he might just like start doodling in that no column, because like, yep, she talked about this, yep, she talked about that, and I see that every point that I hit was something he already knew. As some of you are listening, you might have some questions that pop into your head. You could jot your questions down in the W and ask them at any point, or ask them at the end when we have time for Q&A, so you don't forget. And the L part for me is, I think, the most interesting part. It's if you learned something new that you did not know before, you could make a note of that. You don't have to give them back to me, but if you do, and I see that everything that I spoke about was something that you already knew, well, that's feedback for me. Or if everything I spoke about was something you learned, then that's also feedback for me. So you can give it back to me when you're done if you want to. Otherwise, like I said, just something to keep you occupied and maybe and stay more engaged during a 45-minute talk. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So today my plan is to orient ourselves, where does the Yampa River fit into the greater Colorado River system, to talk about the aspects of the Yampa that make it a healthy river, or the characteristics that healthy rivers generally have, the ways in which that healthy river can then benefit people and communities, otherwise known as ecosystem services, the threats to the Yampa, and then, if there's time, a little bit about our scorecard project. But we're going to start with orienting ourselves. So the greater Colorado River system flows through many states: Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Mexico. The principal tributaries, the biggest ones, are the Green River up here, the San Juan River, let's see, the Gila, where's that, right here, and Gila, oh, and the Gunnison. The Gunnison is not on here. The Gunnison flows into the Colorado River before it leaves Colorado, and it actually carries, I think it carries about 1.8 million acre feet of water per year, so a little more than the Yampa, but it's a significant tributary too. Oh, and can we go back to the other slide?
Yeah.
And the Colorado River, it goes through all these states, many tributaries flow into it. At the very end of its run, it's the border between California and Arizona, and flows through Mexico for just a little bit before, historically, it had a beautiful delta in the Gulf of California that has since dried up due to many diversions and large dams. But in the next picture, you'll see in 1922, when Aldo Leopold visited the Colorado River Delta, he thought it was one of the most amazing places he'd ever been in his life. He described verdant walls of mesquite and willow, 100 green lagoons. The river was everywhere and nowhere, and it's been described as one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. But since that time, literally, it has completely dried up. Come on in. You guys can grab a clipboard if you want, but you don't have to.
Would you like to take notes?
And you want to just like doodle down questions and that sort of thing. And we'll go on to the next slide. In 2014, though, there was an agreement reached between the United States and Mexico to release a pulse flow. And for the first time in many, many years, water reached the Delta in the Gulf of California, and it was amazing. You can see local children that had never had anywhere to swim. The riparian is a word for the vegetation that grows alongside of a river. It came back to life quicker than anybody ever could have expected. And that agreement it was so successful, that pulse flow in 2014. I think I have something. Yes, I think that going forward, there is a period between May and October where that pulse flow is going to continue, and a little bit of water that everybody is so desperate for is going to be allowed to reach the Gulf of California, which is really, really cool. But we digress. We'll get back to the Yampa River. So how does the Yampa River fit into the Colorado system? The Yampa River has that characteristic 90-degree turn. It flows north from the flat tops and then west right at the city of Steamboat Springs. It's right at that big curve. And then it goes into the Green River in Dinosaur National Monument. The Yampa River is the biggest tributary of the Green River, and the Green River is the biggest tributary of the Colorado River. So it is a major contributor to the Colorado River system. Oh, and this is one thing I forgot. On your pieces of paper, one of the things, I have prizes. This talk is called What the Yampa Contributes to the Colorado River System, I believe. I'm not going to explicitly tell you guys that, but over the course of the presentation, there are 4 big contributions. And if you jot those down, I have Friends of the Yampa magnetic koozie and some really cool stickers. So.
Okay, so what are we talking about again?
What are 4 big things that the Yampa River contributes to the greater Colorado River system?
She just said one of them.
And so where does all this water come from?
Oh, right.
So this is a really cool map that actually I got from Candace, the executive director of the museum, when we were working on the exhibit. If you go to look at the exhibit, you'll see a topographic map of the Yampa River Basin. And we cut off half of what you see here. We made a mistake, I think. And so we limited the river basin to what you find in Colorado and included the white, because you often hear about the Yampa and White basins together. But the Yampa Basin, there is a huge portion of it in Wyoming. Does anyone know the name of the river watershed in Wyoming that is such a big contributor to the Yampa River?
Is it the encampment?
Ghosts are there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little snake.
Yeah, so good job, Katie. It's a Little Snake River. And the Little Snake River flows along the border between Wyoming and Colorado, and all of the tributaries flowing into the Little Snake River then flow into the Yampa River. But this is the watershed. And how many of you do not know what a watershed is? Okay, yeah, well, and maybe some people who also didn't raise their hands, I imagine. But a watershed is the land mass, and within that land mass, all the water that falls as precipitation in any form drains to a common river basin. And so any water precipitation falling in that red area is going to eventually end up in the Yampa River and then flow into the Green River from there. So whether it goes through via the Little Snake River or any of the many tributaries of the Yampa River, at the end of the day, water falling in this area goes to the Yampa. We'll go to the next one. And the Yampa River originates in the flat top south of Steamboat, and it starts as the Bear River. It is only called the Yampa River after the confluence with a creek called Phillips Creek, which I think alternatively is often referred to as Chimney Creek. I was looking it up this morning, and just to verify, because Katie and I have talked about this
A lot.
Yeah. But it doesn't become the Yampa River until somewhere around the town of Yampa /Pittsburgh. And then here is an awesome map. You can see that outline of the watershed boundary. Again, just like that red shape. But this map is really cool in showing the main tributaries of the Yampa. And the biggest tributaries of the Yampa, the Bear River, which is the headwaters of the Yampa, Trout Creek, the Elk River, the Williams Fork down past Craig, Elkhead Creek right before you get to Craig, and then of course the Little Snake River. And this is my first time for you guys to interact with your paper. Can you name all of the tributaries of the Yampa that are in Routt County? How many do you know? So just take a minute, in the K column, jot down the tributaries that you can think of the Yampa River in Routt County. I limited it to Routt County because the museum just serves. It's a lot, yeah. I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute to brainstorm. And then turn to your neighbor and see if you can add any more. Okay, Katie, we can go to the next slide. These were all the ones I could think of, and I probably missed some. Can you guys tell me some that I missed? There are a lot of, I think there are probably more little tributaries like Green Creek that
Burgess Creek?
Oh, Burgess Creek, yes, I forgot Burgess Creek, yes.
And what about Mad Creek? No?
Mad Creek
sort
flows
of.
into the Elk and then flows into the Yampa.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, not directly, but indirectly, yes.
Okay. Is Trout Creek?
Yeah, I
Oh,
was gonna say
Creek.
Trout Creek.
Yes, Trout Creek.
Trout Creek is in here.
Oh yeah, probably missed a bunch in South Route, I bet. Yeah, so there are a lot of little tributaries that feed into the Yampa, in addition to the big ones, Little Snake, Elk. Yeah, and a lot of those are on here, but not all of them. Trout Creek, and actually not a lot of them are on here, so yeah. We can go
Walton
into.
Creek too.
Oh, and Walton Creek.
That's on,
Oh,
that's on
Walton,
there.
okay.
You got it, I'm
But
sorry.
Burgess Creek, I did miss Burgess Creek for sure. And so back to the watershed. So where does all this water come from? Do you guys, does anybody want to hazard a guess at where the water that fills the Yampa comes from? Yes, snow, yeah. And so the snow falls in the mountains, and we can go to the next slide. The mountain ranges around Steamboat Springs. We've got the Park Range right here, the Elkhead Mountains out north of Haven and Craig in the California Park area. The Park Range includes Rabbit Ears, Mount Werner, Buff Pass. The Zirkles are part of the Park Range. Down here, the Gore Range, you would see maybe from Kremling or on your way through Summit County. And then, of course, the Flat Tops to the south. We can go to the next slide. And like I just said, the Park Range extends from Rabbit Ears to Mount Werner to Buffalo Pass and the Zirkles. It is the largest contributor of water to the Yampa River via massive amounts of snowmelt each season.
What are the circles?
The Zirkles, like if you go up to Clark and take Seed House Road.
I just got here.
Oh, you just got
so I know nothing. pretty much,
Okay,
but-
so
It's such a funny
take a
name.
trip up 129 to the little town of Clark, and there is a road called Seed House Road that takes you to camping spots and trailheads and the Zirkle Mountain Range and the Zirkle Wilderness areas. Beautiful, dramatic mountains over 12,000 feet tall. But they actually generate a lot of water that flows into the Elk River, and Mike might be able to help me with this, but the Elk River has more volume for its length than any river in the world. Does that?
I hadn't heard that, but yeah, I can find that.
Because it's so short, but it carries so much snowmelt from the Zirkle. So per mile, it is carrying an incredible amount of water and donating that to the Yampa. Another interesting fact people often hear about the Wolf Creek area is having the highest snow water equivalent in their snowpack. They do. Wolf Creek would be this little purple area down here. For a specific point, they do have the highest snow water equivalent. But over the largest area, the park range has a higher snow water equivalent. That just means how much water is there actually in the snowpack, because there's a lot of air in the snowpack too, than any other mountain range in Colorado. So I think that makes us pretty special.
Does the Zircles refer to its own particular mountain range?
My understanding is, I was clarifying all this morning, getting ready for you guys, is that they are part of the park range.
Okay.
But
That's the name of the wilderness area.
so maybe you would call it a sub-range of the park range in the same way that you would refer to the Rabbit Ears Range or like the Buffalo Pass area mountains. Mike, do you have anything to say on that? Mike is my colleague, and I didn't know he was coming, and here I am like putting him on the spot.
No, I think you got it right. I mean, it's a kind of a subset of the park range.
Okay.
So it's an informal designation?
Calling the Zircles their own mountain range.
Are
Yeah,
there
I
clear
mean,
boundaries, or is it
kind
just
of,
yeah.
an informal word we use for that area?
Well, I think park range is formal.
Yeah.
I think that's recognized.
Of Zircles.
And the Zircles, I think that's, I would probably go to Wikipedia when you leave here. Wikipedia is actually,
Probably named by a Boy Scout troop or something.
yeah, a good source of information. But
Bunch
I
of kids.
I would say it's fair to say it's a sub-range of the park range.
It's marked on most maps.
Mhm.
With
Yeah.
roughish
Yeah.
But it's also just the fact that it's a wilderness designation because it's called the Mount Zircle Wilderness. And so we have adopted calling them the Zircles. But, right?
I don't know,
It's like
probably. Makes
it's
sense to me.
a designated wilderness
Yeah.
within the park range that has the
Yeah.
name of Mount Zircle.
And then the other places we refer to because they're mountain passes, like we talk about Rabbit Ears Pass because it traverses the park range, and Buff Pass because it goes over the park range. But yeah. Okay, well, you've got something for the W column.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really screwed up.
We can go to the next one. And this is a cool graphic. It shows the population on the east slope, 4.5 million people. I think this is maybe from 2011, so it's probably bigger by now. With 2.5 million irrigated acres. We're on the west slope, we have 500,000 people and almost 1 million irrigated acres. So that's kind of crazy in and of itself, but you can see that the Yampa River, compared to the other rivers leaving the state of Colorado, is quite large. So the Colorado River itself carries the largest volume of water. The Gunnison River, like I said before, it flows into the Colorado, so that 4.5 million acre feet per year includes what's contributed by the Gunnison, which is about 1.8 million acre feet. And the Yampa contributes 1.5 million acre feet of water to the Green before the Green flows into the Colorado. So it is a really big contributor of water to the greater Colorado River system.
Question, how much water does the Colorado contribute that's stolen and go to the Front Range? I just learned that.
Oh, that is a great question. We can go back to that. I do not have that piece of data. I would have to look it up. I did do some research though, because there is a lot that leaves, and that's called the state of Colorado has 4 main river basins: the Platte, the Arkansas, the Colorado, and I think this one is called the Rio Grande, I think. And it's considered a trans-basin diversion if water goes from one of the 4 major watersheds in our state to another. And like you're referring to, a lot of water from the Colorado River Basin is going over
Out of
to the front.
Grand Lake, I think.
Yes, there's a huge, I don't even know what it is, up by Grand Lake.
Too much anyway.
Right. But I did find out, interestingly, I didn't include this slide because I had so many slides, but I didn't know that the Yampa River does see 4 out-of-basin diversions. They're not trans-basin diversions, but they do because they don't leave the Colorado River Basin, but they leave the Yampa River Basin. They're called the Dome Creek Ditch, Stillwater Ditch, and I can't remember the other one, and then something like the Little Snake Pipeline. So the Little Snake Pipeline takes water out of the Little Snake and dumps it into the North Platte. And the Stillwater Ditch takes water out of the Bear River and dumps it into the Colorado River water, the upper Colorado River watershed. And same thing with the Dome Creek Ditch and the other one that I can't remember.
Those are canals.
Yes, ditches, that's what they're called. It was news to me when I was preparing for this that I had no idea anything left the Yampa River Basin. But we do have 4 small out-of-basin diversions in our watershed. And so we always talk about the Yampa as being wild. Is it really wild? Let's dig a little deeper. We do have reservoirs on the Yampa River. The biggest are Stagecoach Reservoir, so you'll get to know all these places. Yeah, Stagecoach Reservoir down by Oak Creek, Steamboat Lake up north near Clark, and of course Elk Head Reservoir right on near the county line on your way to Craig as you travel west on Highway 40. In addition to those, there are many smaller reservoirs at the headwaters of the Yampa, up near the flat tops. You've got the Stillwater Reservoir, the Upper Stillwater, which I think they call the Bear, and Yamcolo. There's Pearl Lake, lots of other reservoirs. So this is not a fully free-flowing river. There are dams and reservoirs on the main stem. Let's talk about the amount of, I think that should say acre feet. Stagecoach Reservoir can hold 36,000 acre feet of water. I think a good way to think about acre feet is if you think about a football field and how much water would be on that football field if it was covered 1 foot deep. And if you went up 36,000 feet, that's 36,000 acre feet of water. And that's how much water is. So if you were flying in a plane 36,000 feet above the ground, all the way down on a football field, that's about how much water would be potentially stored in Stagecoach.
Enough that photo is all underwater.
Yes, oh yeah,
all
that's a
gone
great
now.
photo. That is where Stagecoach Reservoir used to be before it was filled in.
Where's the dam?
I think the dam is right
Where
there.
it sort of pinches.
Oh yeah.
Wait, well, what do you think that's where Stagecoach Reservoir used to be?
Oh, sorry, that's where the Yampa River used to be before
So
it was
that's a
built.
photo of the Yampa River before the reservoir?
There's a really cool photo in the main museum exhibit, not the Yampa River exhibit. What's the other exhibit on the left that has the picture of Vernon Summers? And,
Oh yeah,
The history of Steamboat.
It's a history of Steamboat, and it shows 3 old-time ranching families who had homesteaded the area, looking down onto this view. It's a really cool photo.
Bruce Henderson would have been one of them.
Yeah, I can't remember the 3 names, but
Bruce took the photo.
Oh, Bruce took the photo.
Yeah.
So Elk Head Reservoir, 26,000 acre feet. Look how much muddier that is than Stagecoach.
Yeah.
And then I think I have one more picture of a reservoir. Steamboat Lake, also 26,000 acre feet. And we'll go to the next one. So what's interesting, this is a graphic from 2011 and 2012. This was created by the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. They manage Stagecoach Reservoir and several other reservoirs off of the Yampa. If you look at the total volume of water coming down the Yampa River in the year 2011, this is called a hydrograph, and so it shows how the amount of water in the river changes over the course of a year. This is a very typical pattern for a snowmelt river like the Yampa. It's not up and down, up and down, up and down with every thunderstorm. Rather, it goes up in the spring during runoff and then comes back down again as the runoff dwindles. This represents the entire volume of water in the river over the course of the year to 2011. The red represents the total volume of water in storage. So although we have storage in all of these reservoirs, compared to the volume of water flowing down the river, it's a pretty small amount, and it allows the Yampa to have that natural pattern of flow. The natural flow regime, or a hydrograph, is what this kind of graph is called. Of course, in drier years, the storage is more impactful. The next graph is 2012, and you can see that the flows are much lower. The storage proportionally has a bigger impact compared to the water, especially in the late season, when you can see there's almost no water and there's storage right here. Of course, that has a larger impact during a dry year. So the Yampa is wild, not completely wild, but compared to other rivers in our state, it functions in a really healthy way and is deserving of our protection, in my opinion. And so we can go to the next slide. The Yampa River, according to, this is something that came out by an organization called Conservation Colorado. They did a really high-level river health assessment for all the rivers in the state of Colorado, and the only river to get an A in the whole state was the Yampa River. So, you know, I think it's commonly expected that we would consider the Yampa River one of the healthiest rivers in our state. But what does make a river healthy? After this, I have a series of 10 pictures. They are not of the Yampa River, they're just random river pictures. And Katie's going to click through them kind of slowly. And what I would love for you guys to do is in the, I don't know, in one of your columns, whichever one you think is the most appropriate, just look at the pictures and notice the river. And if you see things that you think would make a river healthy, write those down. So just characteristics of a river in the following 10 pictures that would maybe be something to consider.
Okay, here you go.
Yeah, so there's one.
I can go back. Is that ice?
That's rock,
There,
cobble,
Oh, that's cobble.
cobble,
Okay,
and then
okay,
there's
okay.
the flow of water
Got
right
it.
there.
Okay. Good question, because it looks like. Oh. You guys overwhelmed.
I think this is the last one. I think there were,
Oh.
I think this is the last one.
Should I check? Yeah.
Okay, so,
So these were all pictures of healthy rivers?
no, they were just pictures of rivers.
Okay.
What are some things that you maybe notice that you're like, well, that's probably important for a healthy river? Did you think of anything?
Sure, no houses,
Okay,
Well, yeah.
so a lack of development.
Yeah.
Sure, okay.
no,
What else looks fast?
no borders with farmland to have agricultural runoff into it,
Okay,
rapids to give oxygen to the river.
okay, cool. What else? Who else can add some things? Yeah.
Vegetation alongside the river and also decay that the animals or fishes make use of,
And where would the decay come from?
fallen trees and dead grasses.
There's a school of thought that our aesthetic is informed by the English countryside aesthetic from the 17 or 1800s. If you imagine a storybook about Beatrix Potter with a meandering river with grassy banks and very neat and manicured, and that has affected how we perceive rivers here. But you are right, the wood is actually a really good thing, and it doesn't match that aesthetic, but it does contribute things as it decays for fish and insects.
Was there a beaver dam there, or?
There was, one picture had a beaver dam in it.
I said that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if there's, because there weren't pictures of animals really, but I'm assuming that habitat
Yes.
attracts animals of all different
Mhm.
species.
Yep.
Yeah, there were boulders creating pools and eddies.
So there's some like heterogeneity kind of. to
Well, place for a fish like
the- yeah, totally.
and kayakers.
And what? And kayakers like them
Kayakers.
too. Yeah, absolutely.
And there was.
Sandbars, is the sandbars a good
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
word to
Sandbars are really important.
The cobbles as opposed to mud on the bottom.
Yep.
Sand.
And sand, yeah. And in the world of rivers, this is something else. It's funny when you're, as a teacher, you're mortified you're going to get something wrong because the high school kids will call you out on every time. When I was working with Katie, I was mortified I was going to get something wrong because this display is going to be up for a year. I like fact checked myself on everything. But when we talk about sediment in rivers, that includes mud, sand, cobble, boulders, anything that the river is moving along can be included in that general term sediment. So when you hear sediment and you're talking about rivers, it's not necessarily just like dirt, like fine-grained particles. That includes it's a blanket term that would include things that you all said, the cobbles, the boulders, the sand, the mud, all of that stuff. So let's see how you guys did. So the first thing, and this is the most simplified list I could possibly come up with. I tried really hard to make it simple. Space gets to what the gentleman at the edge noticed about development up to the edge of the river. A river needs space to move, and when we build houses and infrastructure or have irrigated agriculture right up to the edge of the river, if we constrain the space that a river needs, that is going to limit its ability to carry out its functions and ultimately, at the end of the day, serve the organisms like people that depend on it. It needs flow, so adequate water, clean water, water in the right pattern over the course of the year. The species that live in our river are adapted to a hydrograph that works with a snowmelt system where it peaks in the spring and then gently falls down over the rest of the year. Sediment, and that includes all those things. The sandbars that get deposited as the flows come down are awesome, super important habitat for fish, but there is, in the literature of people who study rivers, they talk about a tripod of things that have to exist for a healthy river, and they say it's the flow regime, the water in the river, the sediment regime, which is the sediment carried by the river, and the wood regime, the wood carried by the river. And all of those things are the physical basis for a healthy river system. And that's what that word wood is referring to, is the trees from burns or from beavers that cut down a cottonwood tree or whatever it is. When those trees and those woody pieces fall into the river and are carried along in its current, they are doing all sorts of wonderful things. They are helping to dissipate the energy, because when water carries sediment or when water carries wood, it is a way to dissipate the energy of that water, so it's a way to mitigate the erosion that might happen. When wood gets stranded, and you see, like, for example, those large cottonwood trees stranded, it changes the flow hydraulics, it creates little pockets of habitat that weren't there before. As it decays, it releases nutrients back into the water that the little insects that live in the river, they're called benthic macroinvertebrates, that they can get their nutrition from that decaying matter. And then of course they're eaten by fish, who are then eaten by ospreys and bald eagles. And so the wood kind of helps as a part of that nutrient cycle for everything that lives in the water. And then of course plants and animals, because a river cannot function without the biotic component. The biology is just as important as the physical part of a river. And plants that form the riparian buffer along either side of the river, willows, cottonwoods, alders, natural grasslands, hawthorn, all of those things are super important for a healthy river, as are animals large and small. So beaver are wonderful for a river system. They help slow the flow and break up the energy of floodwaters. They can mitigate against the effects of drought and wildfire and flooding, and they provide great habitat for trout. They say that trout have learned how to jump over beaver dams. So when people claim that beaver dams are bad for trout, I would say that is misguided information. They are very good at jumping over beaver dams. And those, the beavers, they burrow out deeper spots so that they can kind of like transport their materials and stay safe from predators. But those deeper spots underwater that they excavate allow for cooler water to exist, and that provides a cold water refuge for fish as the water temperatures heat up. So these are the basic things. And so now I have the fun part. These are pictures of the Yampa River. So these are all pictures I've taken during my field work with Friends of the Yampa, working on the Yampa River. I'm probably biased from the Yampa River starting in the flat tops down maybe towards Hayden, just because that's where I've worked this year. So if you don't see a lot of photos of the middle Yampa or the lower Yampa, it's not because I don't love those parts of the river. I just haven't done as much field work there yet. But this is an amazingly beautiful beaver complex right below Stillwater Reservoir. If any of you, has anybody been up there this summer to see? Did you notice this beaver complex?
I noticed it last year, actually, we watched the building.
Yeah, it's amazing, it's gorgeous. And what is this doing? This is spreading the water out into the floodplain and allowing the water to slowly soak into the soil. It's helping the water table to be higher so that the riparian vegetation can easily access water and grow and thrive. Probably not so applicable here because this water is coming out of the mountains, but in many places where beaver dams are slowing down water that is runoff from urban environments or agricultural environments, the nutrients that can lead to a lot of problems in water bodies are filtered out in these ponds. They settle down to the bottom. There's rich microbial activity in the mucky sediment at the bottom of the beaver ponds, and all of those nutrients can get processed so that the water flowing out of the beaver dams is clean, filtered water. They're just amazing. The next picture is the same beaver dam, but a little bit up close. It's really cool. And they're amazing engineers. I've read that they build these dams and then they take sticks and put them in, so they build their dam like this, but then they take sticks and they put them in like that so that the flow of the water reinforces the dam and jams the sticks further in there. They're just great, amazing ecosystem engineers. They're the only other, I would say that compared to humans, the only animal that modifies their landscape as much as we do is the beaver. When we modify the landscape, we tend to decrease the biodiversity. When beavers modify the landscape, they tend to increase the biodiversity dramatically with habitat for fish, insects, birds, riparian vegetation, and a source of forage for ungulates, all the mammals, large mammals too that live
Why
in
haven't we learned that from the beavers?
I mean, I think there's energy behind it, but it's a hard sell because we've spent so much time building expensive human-built infrastructure, and beavers get in the way of that. So they are a nuisance if your only metric is the built environment. But if you think about the ecosystem services and the health of the ecosystem, they're really amazing creatures for sure.
And fire mitigation.
And what? And fire mitigation, yes, and we are going to talk about that later on too. This is up below, this is off of the public land, but still high up in the watershed on the Bear River. This is a landowner who gave me a tour of his property, and so the Bear River is really tiny. A lot of the Bear River has agricultural land right up to the edge, but his hay fields are just off of the river just a little bit. And right around the river, you can see this amazing riparian environment. I think and there are beaver dams all in here. It's hard to see, but maybe one of my other pictures, you can see the beaver dams. That's a beaver dam right there. So it just helps the soil and the land act like a sponge, and it spreads out those nutrients, allows the water to filter down, recharge aquifers, raise the groundwater table. And I think the next one is perhaps the video, which I have no idea if this will work, but Katie, or maybe let me just see if I can press play.
Oh, yeah.
Just, a really different view of the Yampa, so different from what we see here in town, but up on the Bear River.
Are beavers territorial?
I don't know about territorial. My understanding is that they are really loyal to their family members, and if you try and remove them without removing the whole family, they will go back because they care about their family units a lot, and they tend to move upstream. So they tend to colonize the point downstream in a watershed, and as they need new environments, they tend to work up the watershed, not down the watershed. And so sometimes you see those stair-stepped types of environments. As far as territorial per se, I'm not really sure.
I mean, at some point, the beaver house must get overflowing, or somebody decides that the kids have to go.
Right? Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that happens. The youngsters get booted. Yeah.
This is another one, huh?
I think we're going the wrong direction. Maybe.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. So that's the dam right there where all the sticks are.
Okay, this is a property above Stagecoach Reservoir. This landowner was not very happy about the Beaver Dam, which had flooded during spring runoff, flowing onto his hay fields, but he wasn't too worried about it. At the time we were there, he had no plans to tear it down. But I don't know if you can tell, but there's some stakes here. He has engaged in some planting efforts to plant willows and alders. And while this flooding might seem at first to be an inconvenience for the work he's done, I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to help him out a little bit. And this dam, this was again during spring runoff. This picture was taken in May of this year. But the Beaver Dam is being completely overwhelmed by the spring flow, and all of this water is going in a sheet flow through this riparian island over here, and it was just beautiful to see. And that is amazing habitat for fish. The young fish will go into these environments that are out of the main channel where the water's not flowing as fast, and it gives them a chance to rest and maybe be away from larger predators that are in the main channel of the river. And also those areas are full of nutrients and good things to eat. Another section of the Yampa, this is also during spring runoff. This is downstream of Lake Catamount, and you can just see the riparian vegetation is just soaking up all of this flood water, and the roughness of the riparian vegetation really helps to break down the energy of the flooding water and prevent erosion from being a problem. And this piece of land, I would expect that the erosion wouldn't be that bad because they have such healthy riparian vegetation, and that the spring flows are just flowing right through that riparian habitat. Another picture from the same property. Again, you can see, what does a healthy river need? It needs space. This river has access to its floodplain. It needs water. There are healthy spring flows coming through here. It needs vegetation, plants and animals. I know that I think that near this property, they do have to get rid of beaver because the beaver are always in the irrigation ditches. So that's why yes. So when they're a problem, they're a problem. But lots of things. The one thing this piece of river probably isn't getting as much of, I said it's downstream of Catamount. Anybody know what it might not be getting downstream of a reservoir?
Flooding?
Well, most of the reservoirs on the Yampa operate so that the amount of water coming in equals the amount going out, so that the river can still have that natural hydrograph. So the water is being allowed to go through, but what cannot go through?
Like log jams and
the wood and the sediment.
So that piles up behind the dam.
And I think Catamount, for example, I think spends a considerable amount of money each year getting rid of the wood. I don't know what they do about the sediment. I imagine it's just piling up. But they do have to get rid of the wood that accumulates upstream of that dam. This is a little further down, but still above the city of Steamboat Springs. This landowner, my two colleagues of mine and I were able to, we walked the river corridor, we literally walked in the river, and it was just amazing to see the habitat complexity. You can see that this was after the runoff, so the water flows had come down, and you can see the gravel bars that were deposited. That's a great sign of a healthy river. You can see wood, like little pieces of wood piled up. There was definitely beaver activity on this land, and the amazing lush riparian growth all along. But again, this piece of river, what does it have? It has flow. Right now the flow is low, but it had flow. It has sediment, as evidenced by the bars. It has space. It can overflow its bank and connect to its floodplain. It has wood coming down from the tributary creeks, and we saw lots of sign of the animals, the beaver, and we know that there's great fishing here.
Are there otters out here?
Yes, and the otters, I don't know the history, but what I do know is that there were not that many, and they are rebounding.
Because the habitat's getting better.
Like, I don't know, do you know anything about that, Mike?
Not specifically, but yeah, I would assume it has to be the improving habitat.
Yeah, but we do have otters in
California,
Maine.
we used to have river otters come in I had a ranch and there was a creek through it, and river otters would come, which was like Disney animals playing on the lawn. It was pretty exciting.
They're super cool.
They were lovely, yeah.
Then another picture from that same property, just you see these huge deposits of sediment from the flood season. So the river carries massive amounts of sediment, which is actually good because there are three ways. There are three ways that the energy of a flood can be dissipated. It can be dissipated if the water is holding sediment, because it takes energy to hold the sediment. It can be dissipated by roughness, and so if you can imagine water flowing over a rough landscape with lots of trees, that can dissipate the energy. And it can be dissipated by erosion, and you guys have all seen like massively eroded banks on the side of the river. So if you can have sediment in the water and roughness alongside, you're going to have less erosion. And the sediment is a healthy part of a river's function, but you don't want the erosion to get out of control because there's not enough sediment in the water, or there's not enough vegetation and roughness alongside of it. And this is below the town of Steamboat. You can just see the huge trees stranded on those cobble banks, evidence of a healthy river in action. Again, downstream of Steamboat. I took that picture because of the pelicans. I think maybe I took the picture because of the wood. We were documenting the instances of large wood in the river, but the pelicans were pretty cool too. And we floated this section twice, and they were there both times, so the same spot. And of course, that last picture had those huge cobbles on it too. And again, more pictures of wood. Although those look like maybe they were placed there. I didn't think about that before, but they may have been left there on purpose to help prevent erosion.
So do you think that sometimes, walking on the core trail, and you'll see over by the baseball fields, some old cars and stuff?
That was an old way of trying to deal with erosion. And of course, our land management practices, I'm showing you all the good stuff, right? But there's a lot of bad land management too, or like maybe old ways of thinking. And certainly, we call it Detroit riprap. People would put the old cars along the banks of the river to try and prevent the erosion from happening. And it didn't work very well, and then you end up with sharp metal in the river.
And it really didn't create a good habitat for...
No, and of course maybe who knows what else is in the cars besides just the metal, right? I mean, oil or gas, I don't know. But that was an old way of trying to deal with problems of erosion. And then I would say like the metamorphosis has been from that to trying to armor the banks with large boulders and just hold it all in place, which ends up just pushing the energy of the river downstream. And so while you might save your own bank, there's probably going to be some erosion effects downstream because that water's energy is just bouncing off the rocks and going farther downstream. And a lot of efforts at controlling erosion and correcting some problems where your banks maybe are collapsing or you're losing too much land now involve wood instead of rock.
Do they use Christmas trees for that?
Is what?
Do they use Christmas trees for that? California uses old Christmas trees.
Not that I know
They
of.
pick them up and use them to
one of the properties I was
try to hold the
on,
banks of a river.
I asked them where they got all the wood that they had used to reinforce their banks, and they had gotten it from an old burn scar further up on their property. So just wherever you can get it, yeah.
We use them for different...
But wood is nice, it can absorb the energy more so than rocks can. This is downstream of Steamboat. This is the Elk River coming in. You can see, this isn't, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I can tell because I'm close that there's a big sediment line between the Elk and the Yampa. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, so that's the sediment being carried by the Elk as it goes under Highway 40 and then joins with the Yampa west of town. And of course, another great example of all the things a river needs. It needs room to move. This river has flooded over its banks. It's very connected to its floodplain. It's probably creating some new side channels. There's that nice pulse of water and sediment, and I imagine there's plenty of wood being carried down from the Zirkle Wilderness area. This is from the 2011 floods. We have lots of amazing photographs from that year. If you lived here in 2011, I'm sure you remember the floods because they were so big. It was such a big water year. This is just flooded cottonwood trees in the Morgan Bottom area. You can see the power plant in Hayden in the background. And these floodwaters are great for cottonwoods. They carry sediment and nutrients, and as they dissipate, the nutrients and sediments settle out, and they nourish the trees and the riparian vegetation and increase the health of the soil. And seedling cottonwoods require those newly created sandbars that are left over to reestablish themselves. So it's just great all the way. I know it's an inconvenience. Does anybody here live on land that got flooded this year that's listening to me saying, gosh, that is such an inconvenience? Yeah, because it is an inconvenience. Yeah, but if you
Apparently
can,
I do,
right.
according to my
But if you can look at the big picture,
friend here.
it does have some good, it has lots of good effects too. This is cool. This is another cool contribution. This is where the Little Snake River flows into the Yampa River. And what do you notice about the Little Snake?
Colors different now.
It's what?
The colors.
It carries, okay, so the Yampa River carries 80% of the water that goes into the green. The other 20% comes from the Little Snake. The Little Snake carries 80% of the sediment that goes into the green, and the Yampa carries 20%. So the little
symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, so the Little Snake River is really cool because it carries so much sediment, and that sediment actually is really important to the Colorado River system because the greater Colorado River system is starved of sediment due to very large dams like the Flaming Gorge Dam upstream on the Green River. The Green River is so dependent on what the Yampa brings to it, that load of sediment, that natural pulse of meltwater that flows into the Green really, really revitalizes the Green River downstream of its confluence with the Yampa, and then it carries those things on down to the Colorado River. And of course the wood too. We wouldn't expect the Green River to have very much wood because the Flaming Gorge Reservoir upstream would capture a lot of that. Another picture of the Snake River, you can see as it dries out that it's just left behind just sand everywhere later in the season. And then of course the Yampa River right here. This is in Dinosaur National Monument. Of course the river is much more constricted in its lower reaches. It does not have that big, beautiful like agricultural landscape to flood out into a floodplain. It's constricted by the geology of the area, but yet in the bottom of the river you can still see river processes in action with the sandbars that are deposited every year in new places. And there are several endangered fish that really depend on the habitat in Dinosaur National Monument for their spawning habits. And one of the cool things that I learned from a retired park ecologist, I don't know if any of you guys know Tamara Nauman, she's an amazing woman, she knows a lot about the ecology down here. She said that one of the problems with tamarisk, has everybody heard of the invasive species tamarisk, is the tamarisk comes in and it actually is really good at establishing itself on these sandbars. But it's too good because what it does is it traps the sand in place, and what the native fish like to do is they will deposit their eggs in the newly formed gravel and cobble bars that have lots of nice interstitial spaces between the rocks, and that's where they lay their eggs. But when tamarisk comes in, because it provides roughness, it slows the water down, it allows the sediment to drop out, and all the little interstitial spaces between the cobbles get filled in. And so the reproductive cycle of the native fish is disrupted because the place where they normally deposit their eggs is no longer available to them. So just interesting tidbit on native fish and dinosaur. Okay. And I think we're almost, oh yeah, how much more time do I have?
As much as you want, but.
Ooh,
I
okay.
know, you didn't think you could do it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's see, native Colorado river fish. So we can I'll scoot through this. Sediment, flushing flows in large wood, and let's see, let me think about what else is in my presentation. Yeah, because I'm out of time. Maybe we'll just click through this and you guys can look and then I'll have time for questions. So this is kind of the story I was just talking about, native, it's essential spawning ground for native fish. And I think I have some cool fish pictures. The humpback chub.
Look at him. Oh, he's so funny.
Bony tail. Colorado pipemans, I don't think you often find them that big anymore. We read the old-timer accounts, they would be up to 6 feet long, and people, I read there's a publication on the Upper Colorado Endangered Fish Recovery Program website where they used to kill rabbits, tie a rabbit head onto a string that was tied to the fender of a car, and then just have a picnic, and when the line went tight, they drive the car up on the shore and have a 6 foot pike minnow, and they called it I can't remember, like Yampa River salmon or something. I guess they were really bony, but quite flavorful. And if you canned them, the bones got soft and disintegrated, and it was like eating a lovely can of tuna fish or something. So I was fighting it.
Oh my God.
And then the razorback sucker. And then we'll just maybe click through and I'll take questions.
Are any of those fish in the Yampa River around Steamboat?
No, they all need their warm water species. The Yampa River kind of changes its character and goes from a cold water river to a warm water river after Elkhead Creek flows into it. So they could potentially be found up as far as Elkhead Creek near Craig, but I think most of them are downstream.
And the native species in our area would be what?
Are Colorado River native cutthroat trout and whitefish, and both of those are salmonids, so they're in the salmon family. And then we have little smaller fish like speckled dace, and we have a native species of sucker, I think called mountain sucker, and something called a mottled sculpin. Those are the things that you might find here that are native, yeah.
There's lovely pictures of them in the exhibit.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess I just have to skip over ecosystem services, but real quick, just to finish out, of course, a healthy river, why do we care about a healthy river? Because a healthy river actually gives back to us. The provisioning services like water for irrigated agriculture and drinking water, the cultural services like the quiet time you spend by the river, birding, recreating on a paddleboard or in a kayak. Of course, the supporting or maintaining services like the water cycle and photosynthesis and the nutrient cycle are all supported. But then most importantly, regulating services. A healthy river helps us to be more resilient in times of drought, in times of flood, in wildfires, and that resiliency, I think, is what we're going to be really dependent upon in the coming years. And I think for closing, there are two more pictures of beaver meadows post-fire. We can skip this one, sadly. But this is a picture of after the Cameron Peak fire. You can see the burnt hillsides, and the green that you see is a beaver meadow. So the beaver meadow did not burn, and that provides a refuge for wildlife from all over the forest. It provides a seed bank for both vegetation and animal species post-fire, and gives them a place of refuge during the wildfire. And I think I have one more picture of the same fire. You can see burnt all around and massive amounts of sediment that settled out in this green beaver meadow and didn't go downstream to the drinking water sources, which is another important thing for fires. And I guess I'll call it, we can just maybe stop on the scorecard page and I'll take some, we can just, threats to the end.
Sorry, there's threats.
Yeah. And then last page, thank you so much. I did my 3 favorite books ever, if you were really interested in this kind of stuff. Eager by Ben Goldfarb is amazing, the best book ever if you think beavers are interesting. Cadillac Desert changed my life. I have always been an avid reader, but I've always read novels. I read this about, 8 years ago, and it was literally the first nonfiction book. I didn't think I had an attention span for nonfiction, and then I read this book and was ever since fascinated by rivers and the history of water in the West. And then Braiding Sweetgrass is an amazing book about indigenous ways of thinking about our environment. But if you guys ever have questions or want to get involved, of course, go to Friends of the Yampa's website, and I am at jenny@friendsoftheyampa.com.
Thank you. Well, we have to see how they did on their sheets.
Yeah. Oh, and if
you have any questions.
Yes, and if anybody has 4 things that the Yampa River contributes to the greater Colorado River system, I have a koozie and a sticker for me. So, yeah.
I have a quick question. This
Yes.
won't win me anything, but does Colorado get paid for the water that gets ditched over to the east?
I know, I think the Colorado Water Compact was written in 1922, and it established the upper basin states get half of the water, lower basin gets half of the water, and we do not use all of our water, and what we don't use goes downstream and gets used by the lower basin states, I think is, and that's what's such
Will
a
that
big,
evolve into more for Colorado if they need more?
Well,
If you need more here?
I mean, if it were up to me, I'd say let it go to the Delta and let's get that beautiful verdant green Delta back. But I think that the whole idea is that the bank account never added up, because the allotment, we have always had less than what we were allotted. And so it's almost like neither here nor there. It seems silly to fight about water that's not there in the first place, but yeah. That's like a whole other talk. You're gonna have to get Katie to book somebody who
Yeah.
knows about water. Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other questions?
I thought I had learned that the Yampa was the only river in the United States that was not dammed, but that's not true apparently.
Well,
Is it the longest river that's?
no, I would say the Yampa River is an icon because it functions as a natural river. That is maybe not 100% true what we say about it being wild and free, because there are dams, right? But that hydrograph that I showed you, what makes the Yampa special is that because the storage is so limited, it functions as a natural river. And that's the most important thing, that it can maintain those functions, carrying sediment, carrying wood, carrying spring flood water, and being home to amazing riparian and aquatic species.
When you think about the size of some of the other reservoirs, like in Lake Mead and Lake Powell and Flaming Gorge, those are massive. Like we could have put up a, I don't even know, 5 million acre. They're so big. These are like 0.05% of that. So they're super tiny reservoirs. We can see across them, you know? So those hold so much, and these are literally a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about threats to the Yampa, I think existentially the biggest threats to the Yampa River are climate change and trans-basin diversions, and perhaps the building of another large-scale dam. And so the reason I am here talking to you guys is because I want you to care about the river, and if push ever comes to shove, we don't want those things to happen, to divert our water to the Front Range or to build a huge dam that would mess with these wonderful processes that our river carries out. So. Yeah.
So I had kind of a double question. How do they decide when to do a pulse flow, and who is they?
So I'm going to send you to, I found some interest, the Walton Family Foundation of Walmart has chosen the Mississippi River Basin and the Colorado River Basin as two of their main beneficiaries of their environmental, like, philanthropic funding. If you go to their website, they have a lot of they are huge supporters of these pulse flows, and that's a good source of information that's written in layman terms. But it's a compact between the United States and Mexico, and as far as who they is, I don't know who they is, but it was a big accomplishment to get to that agreement.
Engineers or something like the, you know, the I don't know what
I don't know.
agency would be. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Something I would love to know is, I live on Missouri Avenue, and there are cottonwoods planted in everyone's front yard, and you're not allowed to cut them down. Who planted them? Why are they there? Are they there because we are a creek bed? Are they there?
Oh,
to
they're probably
benefit?
doing well because the water table's maybe
so
relatively
low.
close to the surface on
Yeah.
Missouri, and that's all like way back. I would say historical.
Yeah,
floodplain.
it's just interesting because like
Yeah.
there's all
They're all
this
along the path into the botanic garden too, with signs that say high school kids planted them.
Yeah, and I mean I guess like, I can see that because it's by the river, but like Missouri Avenue, we have a creek very near to us, Butcher Knife, and we have Soda. You know, there's all these creeks in Old Town, but it's like, are we planting the cottonwoods to support that habitat on our streets?
No, I
or,
don't
you
know.
know, like
I don't know.
like it's just interesting that they
Yeah.
chose that tree
Yeah.
to plant.
I don't know.
Good shade.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
shade. Excellent
yeah,
shade.
they grow fast.
Yeah,
They do
totally.
provide good shade. Yep.
Did anybody come up with 4 things the Yampa River contributes to the greater Colorado River Basin?
I think I did.
Maybe.
Oh, who said I think I did?
I did.
Okay, what did you get?
I said water,
Yeah.
1.5 million acre feet. Habitat for fish and animals, recreation for humans, replenishes aquifers with resilience from fire and drought.
Well, those are amazing. They're not quite what I was thinking, but they're all true.
You still
But-
get a koozie.
But definitely, you can get a koozie anyway. Thank you for playing. What did you get?
I had most of what you had, but I also had, it provides sediment.
Sediment, yeah.
And then, I'm not sure about this one, but it seems logical that vegetation that grows by the Yampa would then send seeds down into the Colorado that would then create.
I was thinking more along the lines of wood. Because if you think about the Green River with a large reservoir upstream, might be wood starved compared to this river that is mostly not impeded by dams. The trees that fall in the river are just gonna keep on going, and that's actually really important. So I was thinking habitat for endangered fish, other wildlife species, water, sediment, and wood. And recreation and all those other wonderful things too, yeah. But I know it's past 1 o'clock, so if anybody wants to stay and ask me questions, or I'd love for you to look at Friends of the Yampa has a project. It's an ongoing river health assessment. You can find out more about our river health assessment at yampascorecard.org and take one of these postcards if you would like. If you don't want your technical reports, like I said, I handed them out just so you would have something to write on. Please give them back. If you were interested in the technical report, please keep it. And if you feel like giving me feedback, you can leave your KWL sheet with me. So if not, you don't have to either.